I'd like to bring up our second keynote speaker, Miyoung Lee. And Miyoung, wow, I'm just going to, multiple Webster nominee and RTNDA winner, Miyoung Lee began her career as an intern at the CBC the day before the September 11th attack on the World Trade Center in New York. And so began her journey into reporting some of the biggest stories in the next decade. She just marked her 14th year with the CBC as the host and producer of CBC Vancouver News at 11 p.m. Please join me in welcoming Miyoung Lee to Leading Moms.
Hello. So I wasn't here for the morning, so forgive me if there's some redundancy in what I'm saying. So before I get started, I wanted to tell you a bit of the mindset that I'm in this morning, a little bit of background. On December 18th of last year, I was in a car accident. I was run off the road. I was driving home. I host the 11 o'clock news, so I get off the air at 11:30. I do some paperwork. I live in South Surrey, so it's a good 45-minute commute home. I was one exit away from being home when I got sideswiped by what I believe to be an impaired driver. My little Yaris, if anyone knows, tiny little eco auto, slammed into a lamppost. My car flipped into the air, it rolled 6 times, and it landed on its side, and I was trapped in my car. So it took a whole host of really good-looking firefighters, big machine, and paramedics to get me out of my car. But that's why I haven't worked in the last 9.5 months. I haven't worked physically. I feel much stronger. I'm much healthier, but I do have a brain injury that affects my vision and my balance, so we're working on that. This is the first time I've ever spoken publicly about it or even given any perfect strangers any idea of why I haven't been on the air in the last 9.5 months, only to say I've taken a year off. This is the first day that I have driven to Vancouver by myself since the accident. Don't clap yet, I haven't made it home yet, so. And I almost didn't come until I saw my picture on the poster and I thought I better show up. So that's where I'm coming from today. So the theme is childhood, so I'll give you a quick background about me and my childhood. I'm an immigrant. I was born in South Korea. I was 4 when we moved to Canada. Like a lot of immigrant families, my family had the vision of being in Canada. It was my mother, my father, my brother, who was a year below me, and it was perfect timing. My mom wanted us to be in Canada ready for kindergarten. We moved straight from the airport to a 1-bedroom apartment on the downtown east side, for people who know Vancouver, Pender and Victoria Drive. And it still as hairy as it was back then, it is right now. And I went to a school, according to the Fraser Institute, for many, many years that was considered one of the worst in the entire province. Ranked actually the bottom for 5 years in a row, called McDonald. It is a brilliant Aboriginal language school now, Aboriginal teaching school now, so much different. So when talking about my childhood, I thought it's appropriate. I'm going to share with you a few stories about my mom, because I loathed my mother, to the point I think I've told her probably over 100 times that I hated her in my lifetime. But I'm going to tell you a few anecdotes that have come back to me in this last year of introspection of being at home and being a stay-at-home mom. And you know, when you're a working mom, I used to work 3:30 to midnight. I'd get up with my kids in the morning at 6:30. I'd make them breakfast. I'd take them to school. I'd make them their lunches. I'd come home. I'd get my husband's dinner ready, because he doesn't cook worth a lick. And I knew that marrying him, and I put Post-its, heat here, cook here, microwave this. Then I would have a 30-minute nap, and then I would get ready and go to work. And I did that every day, and I slept 4.5 hours a night. And so being at home, I used to always look at the moms that were stay-at-home moms and think, how nice would it be? Go for your little walk with the dog after you drop off, wear Lululemons to school. You know, and I'm not going to lie to you. I've never had more sleep than I've ever had since I was in university. I'm 39. I've never eaten better, because I've had time to sit and make myself a proper lunch. But I've never screamed at my children as loud as I've ever have in my life. And I've never had so many mommy timeouts in my life. So I'm going to kind of go out of chronological order, because I want to get a few anecdotes out. I want to tell you a story about living in the downtown east side with my mom. When I was in grade 1 and my brother was in kindergarten. She would pick us up from school every Monday. There were no cell phones or anything like that, right? It was, we're talking no electronics. My dad was out looking for work, and he always wanted my mom to keep the same schedule. So if anything ever were to happen, he'd know where we were, or kind of the general area. And every Monday after school, my mom would pick us up, and we'd have to take a bus to the one Korean market, and it was on the Kingsway on the border of Burnaby and Vancouver, and we'd have to take a bus. And it was a bit of a long ride, so she would take us to the McDonald's, buy ourselves a McDonald's cone. It back then was 29 cents to appease my brother of this long bus ride every Monday. And every Monday we went to the back of the bus, and we sat in the two seats looking to the front, right beside the sideway seat, so my mom could sit in a sideway seat and be very close to us. Right on the next stop, a group of, I think back then I want to say teenage boys got onto the bus, and they would sit right behind us. And the entire trip, they would snort at us, oink at us, make animal noises at my brother and I and my mother. And my brother and I are 5 and 6. We think this is hysterical. Look at these white boys making animal noises. They're crazy. And, we just never thought about it. But my mom, and I do remember, would sit there, and she was completely stoic, like a poker face. Didn't make any motion. She just paid attention to us. Didn't say a word. This happened for 6 straight weeks. Every Monday, we'd get on the bus. We'd sit in those exact same seats. My mom never changed seats. Those boys always sat behind us. We never changed seats. And every day they would make animal noises at us. And it wasn't until I was much older that I realized that they were oinking and grunting at us because they were being racist. That 6th week, there was a curmudgeon-y old man that used to sit in the very front seat beside the bus driver. You know that guy that was used to get on the bus. You see him, he scopes everybody out. We're on the bus, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he goes, "Enough." He screams at the top of his lungs, "Enough. I've had enough," he says. The bus driver stops at the next stop, and he goes, "Better yet, get off. You're not allowed back on my bus." And those boys got off the bus, and then we never saw them again. It took 6 weeks of my mother enduring that for someone to stand up for her. And I talked to her about this, and I say to her, "Why don't you do anything?" You know what? And do you know what she said to me? Because honestly, I would tear someone a new one if that happened right now. As a mom, your mama bear comes out and you're like, hold up. And my mom said to me, I was the only one you have. And if I engage, I make us all vulnerable. If I interact, I put us in a position where I can't protect you. My whole job in life is to protect you. That is the only thing that I had to do, to get you from A and B and C to where you are to D. I will never forget those boys. I will never forget that feeling that my mother, like where she found that strength, I don't even know. Because for me, I would either start bawling or I would start screaming and I would throw punches. When I was 11, so like every Korean, eventually, we all ended up in Coquitlam. And so we would find ourselves in the burbs. And like a lot of Koreans, my dad found a corner store and he bought it. And we lived right by the corner store. My dad worked 14-hour shifts, except for the 2 hours my mom would walk up for lunch, and so he could walk home and have his lunch that she'd prepared, and he'd have a nap. My mom would work at the store, but she was always home for us after school, and she was always there for us when we wanted to go to school. She even drove us to 3 blocks. If I had my heavy clarinet to carry, she would drive me to school. And like every Korean, we went to the pool a lot. They like saunas and hot tubs. You guys know what I'm talking about. Asian people like to soak in hot stuff. And I remember being at the pool, and I remember being 11 because I just started my 4th elementary school. And met this young girl, and we had played in the pool in a family swim for like almost 30 minutes. And her mom came over, and I remember her mom, like what she looked like so vividly, and she ended up taking this girl away. So I said to her, well, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? Why can't I play with her? And the woman said to me, well, we don't play with chinks. And I remember going to my mom when she was sitting in the hot tub and turning to her and saying to her, "Mom, I was playing with this woman and this girl, and her mom says I can't play with her." And very loudly I said, "Because she told me I'm a chink." And it was like radio silence. And my mom's face was that, again, that stoic face that at the time I I thought that I had caught her off guard, or I thought that I had scared her, but really it was just her inner workings of her mind of now. And I could only imagine what it would be like to be a mother and to explain to your child what it means to be a racist. And I think up until then, I really didn't know very much because I was so little when I came here, and I've always just kind of felt Canadian, so it didn't really bother me and to know that it was different. Although I was one of only 2 Asian families in all of my elementary school. The other was David Yamamoto, who's Japanese, and he was always my line dancing partner or square dancing partner. And I was obsessed with horses back then, and she brilliantly said to me, Miyoung, when sometimes horses get in heat or they're a little bit riled up, we put blinders on so they can't see the periphery. Those horses that, take people in carriage rides in the streets, you put those blinders on and they can only see forward, but they can't see around. Well, she says that's kind of what sometimes people are like. Some people have those blinders on. You can't see them, but they're there. And we just have to be patient because eventually those blinders will come off and they'll be able to see the bigger picture. When I look back at my life as a teen with my mom, it was very difficult. My mom is 5 feet tall. She's stunning. But she was the youngest of all of the female friends that she had, all the Korean moms. She never defended me. Oh, Miyoung, my aunties would say, you'd be so pretty if you just lost a little weight. Oh, Miyoung, don't wear big shoes. You're too tall. Miyoung, your hair is too long. We go on and on and on. But she'd never defend me. She'd never say, don't talk about my kid like that. Don't do that to my kid. When I was in the 8th grade, I had a nervous breakdown. I was 14 years old. I got a C in my first quarter of PE. I was devastated. I'd always gotten perfect grades. I get into a new middle school. I went to Como Lake Junior and I got a C in the first quarter. Not even the first semester, the first quarter. And I lost my mind. I couldn't stop crying. I passed out from so much crying. And the counselor told my mom, you're not to come back with Miyoung to school until you get some help. She needs therapy. And my mom just immediately thought to myself, well, we're Korean. We don't talk about our stuff. We don't talk about our stuff with other people. We certainly don't. But she went to therapy. She was with me the whole time, and she sat through it. And it wasn't until later, I think she realized too, that I was much stronger than she thought. And the reason why I put so much pressure on myself was not because she did it or because I felt this immigrant guilt that my parents had given up everything to come here. It was because I needed my own stuff. I needed to start becoming my own person. And I didn't like the fact that someone told me that I was a C, I was average. And my mom had always told me from a very young age I could do whatever I wanted, but not in the way that, you're powerful and you can. She was just saying to me that your ability is your own and you can decide for yourself how much of that ability you want to unleash on people. I never brought a Korean man home, never found one tall enough to date, really. Never even really brought an Asian man home. They didn't care, but I brought South Asian men home, black men home, white men home. My parents didn't care. Miyoung, you do what your ability tells you, what your path tells you. Very different from a lot of immigrant families. And I think that was really important for me to say, you don't need to fit my mold. In fact, I don't even want you to fit my mold. I want you to make your own mold. When I was in 17, a man was murdered at the Max convenience store by my high school. His name was Graham Niven. He was boot stomped to death by a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old over an altercation outside of a convenience store. He was thrown through the window of the glass of the Max convenience store, and the way that they convicted the 18-year-old was because they matched his boot print from the skull impressions that he left in his skull. He was 34 years old. It was just after 2 or 3 in the morning. The newspapers went absolutely crazy over it. Teens gone wild, and at the time it was right when the Young Offenders Act was being debated and created the Youth Justice Act, so there was a lot of timeliness about it. When I read about that in the paper, I was really angry. I was editor of my school paper. I went to Centennial in Coquitlam, and I wrote a letter to the editor to say, listen, if you're going to do a story about teens, don't you think you should talk about teens? Don't you think you should talk to teens? You do stories about teachers or doctors or lawyers, you sure go after them and you talk to them about it. So he said, sure, write me something. So I wrote a little letter to the editor about the fantastic things that teens do, the amount of amazing work my high school did. We were the only high school in Coquitlam at the time. And that day when it was published, the provincial editor for the CBC came into my cafeteria as I'm eating my fries and gravy, like everyone does. Don't be fooled, your kids are eating fries and gravy. And said, do you want to do a piece for the CBC for me? Do you want to do a news story? I'm 17. I was like, sure, I'm going to be a teacher, but I'll do it. So off I did a 7-minute cover story. And for me, it was super exciting. I'm 17, I'm on television, it's great. And at the very end of the piece, the host, Gloria Makarenko, looked right into the screen and she simply just said, "Thank you, Miyoung." That was it. My parents had every VCR in the house and my neighbor's VCR is going. And all of a sudden, for the first time in my entire life, I saw my dad cry. And my mom turned to him and she goes, "Don't you do it." And then so she starts to cry. And it's not because that I'm on television. It's not even because of anything or the story of the profound tale that I told. It was because for the first time, my immigrant name, the name my grandfather gave me, was on mainstream television. And for some reason, when my mom said to me, "Do you want to change your name?" I never said yes. Actually, she wanted me to be Charlene. Are there any Charlenes in here? Okay, good. I was like, no, I'll keep Miyoung. So it was at that moment that now we can talk that my dad said to me, he goes, "For every reason that I've ever wanted to come to Canada," he wanted to come to Canada as a single guy. He wanted to come, he applied before my mom, he even met my mom. And the immigration officer was like, "Shh, not letting a single guy into Canada, get a family and a wife and talk to me later." And that's what he did. But he said, "For every reason that I've ever wanted to come here," he said, "this is it right now. This is the moment." And so when I told my parents I wanted to be a journalist, oh man, my dad was like, "I thought we were going to be going to computers." No, never ever mentioned computers in my life. But my mom, she just lit up to me and she just said, "You know what? I think you should go for it. I think you should do it." And it's so different from an immigrant parent who made me practice piano for like 10 years in a row and, all that kind of stuff. But she said, "I think you should do it and I think you're going to be great." Because it's scary. It's scary to go into this business. But my mom wasn't perfect. She used to smash dishes in the sink when she was really frustrated. She didn't have any family, barely friends. She used to yell at us all the time when she was frustrated. She was a terrible driver. She's probably gotten to about 8 accidents in my lifetime. But she's beautiful, and no matter what she wanted to do, she went through life with poise and with grace and taught me that that is how we look through life, with our head held up high, with poise and with grace, no matter what, and that we need to walk through it. And if you don't walk through it, you walk around it, you skirt around it, you hide behind it, you're never really going to get through it. So the one thing that she taught me to do, the nugget that I hope this isn't too redundant, is that it's okay to go through the Tim Hortons drive-thru in the morning and feed your kids, or give them sugary cereal in a Ziploc baggie in the car ride to school. It's okay to basically have your kids not be bathed for 3 days. It's okay that you didn't wash their soccer uniform and they're wearing it dirty again. Because you know what? They don't care. It doesn't matter. Think of all the things our parents did. My parents fed me Pop-Tarts. I went to the worst school in the province. I grew up on the downtown east side. It doesn't matter. All that matters to you and to your kids, when they look back, when you're there your age, is that you were present. And I talk about this a lot with even my young students that I mentor, about being present in life. This isn't about you cooking dinner and your kids are in the kitchen and in the kitchen too, and you're talking to them about their school day. It's about giving them eye contact. Everything we talk to our children about, we don't even do ourselves. I always say eyeballs and manners, but we don't even do that for our own children. When was the last time you looked your kids in the eyes and really had a conversation? And quite simply, as my friend Dr. Deborah McNamara would say, your job is only one thing. Your job as a parent and as a mom, you have only one thing, and that is to protect their heart. And it sounds so cheesy when you say it out loud, but you are the only one. You're the only one that's going to defend them and create that strong heart so they can go out in the real world and be called a chink and be grunted at and snorted at, that they can survive those things in a way that they can and be raw and emotional to everybody else. Your job is to protect their heart. So when they come home, you collect them, you love them, you encourage them, but you are present. You are there. I'm asking, honest to goodness, I will promise you, 15 to 30 minutes a day. If you can sit and be present, no phones, no dinner, no dishes, because honestly, the big saying in my family is, who cares? Like honestly, if the dishes aren't done, who cares? If the kids aren't bathed, who cares? Really at the end of the day, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, as I'm reading about 50 children trapped under rubble in Aleppo this morning, who cares? And I think we need to give ourselves a break as parents and as moms. We put so much pressure on ourselves. The best advice I got was, do you know where mommy guilt comes from? She says, just look in the mirror, sister, because your friends don't put mommy guilt on you. Your husband sure doesn't put mommy guilt on you. You kind of just do it to yourself. So the day of the accident, I was hyped up on morphine. I was sleeping. My husband didn't know what to do. It was 5 a.m. So he emailed to everyone in my family to tell them I'd been in a car accident because it was 5 a.m. I'm not sure what he was thinking, probably not in his right state of mind. So just imagine and picture my family, most likely the men in my family sitting on the toilet on their phones in the morning, reading about that I'd gotten into a car accident. And of course they're all calling, and by that point I'm home and I'm in bed and I'm sleeping. And he says, she's fine. She's so lucky. She's so lucky, she's fine. When I woke up in my bedroom from my morphine fix, after being home, I looked to the edge of my bed. There was my mom, driven her way over to my house to sit with me, even though my husband had reassured her she's fine. He'd even sent pictures of me in one piece to her. But she had to be there because she had to be present because she's my mom. Thank you very much.